Hi everybody and very welcome to another episode of Mentor Aviation News. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. So you guys might have heard about bird strikes, but have you ever heard about BEARstrike? Well, that is actually what happened to an Alaska Airlines flight 66 that landed in Yakutat in Alaska, USA this Saturday, the 14th of November. This flight was flown by a 737-700. They came in for landing at 6:30 p.m. local time, and at this time of the year in November, that means that it was absolutely pitch black. Now, Yakutat Airport is up the northern coastline of Alaska, and to the east there's vast wilderness, right? There's a lot of forest and mountains. And what happened was that the aircraft came in, they did a normal landing, and during the rollout, the captain said that around 60 knots he felt an impact on the left side of his aircraft. Now, he had to slow the aircraft down and then make a 180 turn and do something called a backtrack, which is when you kind of taxi back the same runway you landed on in order to exit towards the apron. And when they were backtracking, they saw that it was a brown bear lying on the runway. So they called this into the tower. The tower sent out some personnel to check, and indeed it was a female brown bear, and they could also see tracks from what appears to be her 2-year-old cub. Now they couldn't find the cub afterwards; it had probably run off. But when the crew made a pre-flight inspection of the aircraft, they saw some quite substantial damage to the left-hand engine number 1. Now that's not a big surprise because a fully grown female brown bear can weigh up to about 150 kilos. So how could this happen then? Well, like I was saying, the Yakutat airport has a lot of wildlife around it, okay, but it's only partially surrounded by fencing. And because of that, the crew that's working on the airport are trained to go out and look for wildlife before any landing. Now that's what they had done on this flight as well. So 10 minutes before the landing, they had done a runway inspection, but of course when it's pitch black, it's almost impossible to see something that is more than a couple of hundred meters away. And by design, animals tends to be very hard to see in darkness. Now, if they would have actually seen the bears and been notified that there was larger wildlife on the airport perimeter, well then that would have been told to the flight crew. The flight crew would have gone into holding, and the airport would have done whatever they could to get rid of this animal. That normally entails either calling on a local hunter. They tend to have hunters or hunting teams contracted to the airport that can come on short notice and put a larger animal down if needed. But also, when I was working as an airport firefighter, we were sometimes called when there was deer or even moose on the airport perimeter to use the fire trucks to kind of try to usher the animals out the same way they came in. Now, from a pilot's point of view here, it's very, very little that they could do. The way that the lighting on an aircraft is built is that we have our main landing lights, which is focused on straight ahead onto the runway to illuminate the touchdown zone and the centerline markings. And then we have something called runway turn-off lights that goes out a little bit at an angle. But they are not there to help us kind of scan for threats. No, they're there to help us when we make turns off the runway. Because it's not like when you're driving a car. When you're driving a car, you always have to assume that there might be some kind of threat coming from the side of the road. But in the case of landing with an aircraft, we assume that the area is clear. That's why we have air traffic control, that they give us a clearance to land and no one or nothing should be on the runway. So we're not looking for it, we're just focusing on the runway, the touchdown zone, and after landing to keep the aircraft on the center line until we have decelerated it down to a safe speed. So anything coming in from the side, it would have been impossible for us to do anything about. If you see it early enough, let's say that you haven't landed yet and you see that something clearly is on the runway, well then we can always do a go-around, and you can do a go-around all the way up until you have selected the thrust reversers. But in this case, when they were down to 60 knots, the only thing they could do was just to keep the aircraft going straight, right? You don't try to maneuver around, you don't have to swerve in order to avoid them, because that could end up with you losing control of the aircraft on the runway, which you do not want to do. The only thing to do is hope that that they go between the landing gear, that don't hit an engine, for example. And if they do, well then the engineering is going to have to deal with it. Now in this case, obviously, this is a major hit, right? A major strike. So it caused a lot of damage to the engine. The aircraft was grounded. There was no injuries among the passengers of the crew of the inbound flight. However, the outbound passengers were rebooked onto other flights. So if you have had a strike of any kind, you have to fill in a BEARstrike form. All right, that might sound strange here, but we don't have different type of animal strike forms. You have BEARstrike's form, and if you happen to hit the brown bear, well then you're just gonna have to put brown bear down as a species. I have had to do that on a couple of occasions where I've hit, for example, little rabbits or foxes or things like that. Generally those smaller animals, they don't cause much damage, but you have to go through the same type of procedures. You have to do a BEARstrike inspection to make sure that, for example, if you hit a fox or a rabbit, or in this case a bear, that there's not other parts of the aircraft that has been damaged. You know, you have the flaps down in the position you had them when you had the strike. You make sure that there's no parts of animal that is, you know, trapped inside of the wheel well, for example, or in flap trailing mechanisms, things like that. So you have to fill in that, it has to be reported, and any damage has to be assessed by an engineer, obviously. So these kind of larger animal strikes are fairly uncommon, all right? To my knowledge, this is the first time I've ever heard about a bear being stricken, but I've heard about, for example, moose being stricken or some smaller deers as well. So it does happen from time to time, but it is really rare. Now, the strangest thing that I've ever heard about when it comes to animals being struck by aircraft is actually from a friend of mine who was flying out of a city down in southern France. And as they were climbing out at about 2,000 feet, suddenly, from out of nowhere, they struck a hedgehog. Yes, a hedgehog at 2,000 feet. Now, hedgehogs very rarely fly at those altitudes, okay? But what had happened in this case was that this poor hedgehog had had a really bad day. It had been taken by a large predator, so an eagle, I think it was. Now that eagle was flying away with his prey and looked over his shoulder and saw this huge 737 coming towards it, and as any smart bird would do, let go of his prey and did an evasive maneuver. Okay, but that just meant that that poor hedgehog, who'd just been taken to be someone's dinner, was now released in midair and then smacked into a 737-800. And once again, that's a BEARstrike form that you have to fill in. This time, species, hedgehog. Where? 2,000 feet climbing. And that's the weirdest thing that I've heard about when it comes to striking animals. But that's it, guys. I also want to take this opportunity to say a huge congratulations to Qantas, who turned 100 years old yesterday. Now that is an amazing achievement, and Qantas is one of the few airlines actually that has been continuously operating for 100 years. I know that there are other airlines who are older than that, but they mostly stayed grounded or did not operate during the Second World War. But Qantas did. They were operating from Australia up to Europe during the Second World War as well. Now, Qantas is known for their excellent service and their professional both cabin crew, engineers and flight crew. And I want to extend my biggest congratulations to this company, right? I hope that you'll have 100 more successful years. And the strange fact here is that while they started their operation back in 1920, that was during an ongoing pandemic. And now they're celebrating their 100-year birthday in the middle of another pandemic. But I'm hoping that the next 100 years will not contain any pandemics. And I wish you the absolute best of luck and happy birthday. That's it, guys. That's all I had for today. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of content. If you guys have heard about some strange encounters with animals or animal strikes or anything like that, please file them into the comments below. I'd love to hear about them, and I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you've highlighted the notification bell. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Right, guys, I really hope that you liked that. If you want more content like that, more aviation content, well then check this out. I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you've highlighted the little notification bell. See you inside of the Mentour Aviation app and have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye-bye.